After I politely declined to be a father figure to my ex-wife's son during an awkward conversation at a coffee shop, she showed up at my workplace unannounced with the child in tow, causing a scene and demanding I step up as a father, even though I'm not his dad and we've been divorced for years. My Thursday afternoon took an unforeseen turn when my former spouse appeared at my office with her 10-year-old son. Life, it seems, has a knack for presenting unexpected challenges. To fully grasp how I, a 46-year-old man, found myself in this predicament, a bit of history is necessary. I wed Gina, 45, in our mid-20s. I was 26, she was 25. At that juncture, we were both undecided about starting a family. Our discussions were typical of young couples, filled with phrases like perhaps one day, or we'll see what the future holds. Honestly, neither of us felt strongly about it then. As time progressed, my professional trajectory became well-defined. Working in finance, I cultivated a distinct aspiration: early retirement. Since my university days, the concept of financial autonomy had captivated me. My aim was to dedicate my 30s and 40s to diligent work and rigorous saving, with the prospect of retiring in my mid-50s to explore the world and engage in leisure activities, free from the demands of a conventional job. The more I contemplated this objective, the clearer it became that raising children wouldn't fit. Children entail considerable expense, demanding time, effort, and fiscal assets that would substantially postpone or entirely obstruct my retirement ambitions. This extended beyond mere finances. It concerned the way of life I envisioned. I began to feel unequivocally that becoming a parent was not for me. Concurrently, Gina's viewpoint evolved in the contrary direction. Approximately 7 years into our union, she started subtly indicating a wish for offspring. She would present me with pictures of colleagues' infants and remark on the increasing charm of our nieces and nephews. On one occasion, she even made a jest about a pregnancy scare that caused me significant anxiety. The ultimate clue arrived on my birthday, when she presented me with a book titled The Joy of Fatherhood, suggesting I might find it engaging. Following that gift, I understood a serious discussion was imperative. One evening, I directly inquired if she desired children. She confessed that, indeed, over the years, her longing to establish a family had intensified. She now definitively wished for children, ideally 2, perhaps 3. Our dialogue lasted for hours that night. I articulated my stance as well, that I had given it considerable thought and concluded I did not wish to become a father. The exchange was challenging yet conducted with mutual regard. We both acknowledged that we had cultivated profoundly divergent aspirations for our respective futures. A week thereafter, having both had time to reflect, I introduced the topic of divorce. I conveyed to Gina that I cared for her, but I did not wish to be the impediment to her experiencing motherhood. We were still sufficiently youthful, in our early 30s at that juncture, for her to discover a partner who shared her aspiration for a family. Likewise, I could find someone whose life objectives more closely mirrored my own. Gina did not receive this well. She maintained we could overcome this disparity, proposing compromises such as perhaps only 1 child instead of 3, or deferring it for a few more years. Yet, I understood myself adequately to recognize that having a child I did not genuinely desire would foster resentment within me, while denying her the family she yearned for would engender resentment in her. Despite my efforts to facilitate an amicable separation, the divorce proceedings became contentious. Gina resisted at every turn, prolonging what could have been a simple parting into an almost 2-year tribulation. Ultimately, the divorce was concluded when we were in our mid-30s. Following the divorce, I engaged in casual dating but did not encounter anyone with whom I forged a profound connection until 4 years ago, when I encountered Diane, 44, a woman who aligned with my perspectives on remaining child-free and achieving financial autonomy. We became engaged last year and are arranging our nuptials for this autumn. Regarding Gina, I learned through shared acquaintances that she faced difficulties with dating after our divorce. She never remarried, but approximately 5 years after our separation, she gave birth to a son, now 10 years old. From what I understood, the father was unexpectedly young, perhaps 20 or 21 at the time, and was employed as an apprentice in a building profession. They were briefly betrothed, but he abruptly departed during Gina's pregnancy, and has not participated in the boy's upbringing since. I had successfully kept my distance from Gina's life for many years. We reside in the same urban region but in distinct suburban areas, and our social circles rarely intersect, save for one detail. My sister Melissa, 42, attends the same religious institution as Gina. They are not intimate friends, but they frequently encounter each other at church gatherings. Last month, Gina contacted me via text, proposing we meet for coffee to reconnect. I mentioned this to Diane, who encouraged my attendance. Diane believed it could be an effective way to resolve any lingering unease, particularly as we occasionally received news of Gina through my sister. Consequently, I consented to meet Gina at a cafe situated midway between our respective workplaces. The initial 20 minutes proceeded quite routinely. Superficial updates about our professions, brief references to shared acquaintances, and similar topics. Then, Gina directed the conversation towards her son, Nathan. She elaborated that Nathan was experiencing difficulties due to the absence of a male figure. His educators had suggested he might benefit from a steady masculine presence in his life. Subsequently, the proposition emerged. Would I contemplate dedicating time to Nathan, perhaps accompanying him on fishing trips or to baseball games from time to time? I was taken aback. I informed Gina that I was pleased she had been able to have a child, but that parenthood, even in a partial or advisory role, held no interest for me. My position had not altered. Rather than accepting my response, Gina intensified her appeals. She proposed we could re-establish our family unit. When I brought up Diane, Gina dismissed my relationship, asserting it likely wouldn't endure because she claimed I must secretly long for what we once shared. I attempted to redirect the conversation multiple times, but Gina persistently reverted to Nathan and her aspiration for our reconciliation. Eventually, my forbearance dwindled. I unequivocally stated that I was content with Diane and had no desire to revive anything with Gina. At this juncture, Gina began uttering derogatory comments about Diane, labeling her merely a temporary substitute and implying she was with me solely for monetary gain. I promptly rose, settled the bill for our beverages, and departed without uttering another syllable. Gina subsequently dispatched numerous text messages, oscillating between apologies and renewed endeavors to convince me. I ultimately blocked her contact. I believe that marked the conclusion of the matter. I was mistaken. Yesterday, Gina appeared at my office premises with Nathan accompanying her. She awaited in the reception area until my lunch interval, then approached me as I was preparing to exit. Nathan stood uncomfortably beside her, appearing uneasy with the entire circumstance. Gina introduced me to Nathan as an old friend who might start spending time with you. The unfortunate child seemed bewildered. Before I could respond, Gina initiated a monologue about Nathan's need for a paternal figure and how I was indebted to them after having, in her words, abandoned her years ago. Several of my colleagues were present in the lobby, observing this awkward spectacle. I maintained a subdued tone and informed Gina that her presence was unsuitable and that she needed to depart. She declined, elevating her voice and causing a disturbance. Security personnel eventually approached and requested her to vacate the premises. That evening, I received phone calls from both my sister, Melissa, and my brother-in-law, Kevin, 44. They had already been informed of the incident by Gina. While they concurred that Gina's unannounced appearance at my workplace was improper, they critiqued my overall management of the circumstances. They asserted I was acting without compassion by declining to assist Nathan, an innocent child entangled in adult difficulties. My sister even went as far as to declare, "Had you embraced fatherhood years ago, you likely would have had a change of heart and cherished it." I articulated my viewpoint. I divorced Gina precisely because I did not desire children. I bear no responsibility towards Nathan simply because his biological father abdicated his duties. I barely know the boy. Furthermore, becoming involved now would instill false hope in Gina regarding a reunion, which would be unjust to all parties concerned. My sister countered that I was indebted to Gina because I initiated the divorce against her wishes. In her estimation, I created the scenario that ultimately resulted in Nathan growing up without a father, thus I bear some responsibility to rectify it. I have discussed this with various friends and family members. My mother and several cousins align with my sister's perspective. My friends are divided, though a slight majority support my stance. Diane is entirely in agreement with me and considers my sister to have been irrational for years. This morning, I received an email from my company's Human Resources Department requesting a meeting for tomorrow. I suspect Gina may have also contacted them. I do not believe I am incorrect for upholding boundaries, but the multitude of individuals suggesting otherwise has led me to second-guess myself. The entire situation has become considerably more intricate than I ever envisioned a straightforward coffee meeting could evolve into. Update 1. The preceding 3 weeks have been a tumultuous period of unforeseen complications. Firstly, I should address the human resources meeting I mentioned in my initial communication. The meeting was concise and, in fact, quite sensible. My supervisor and an HR representative simply wished to ascertain if I required any assistance following the lobby incident. They assured me they regarded it as a private affair but sought to ensure my sense of security at work. I clarified the circumstances. They documented it and advised me to inform security if Gina reappeared. For approximately a week after my previous post, things remained relatively calm. Then last Sunday, I received a text message from an unfamiliar number. It was Gina communicating from a new device. She apologized for the commotion at my workplace, but then promptly transitioned to inquiring if I would reconsider spending time with Nathan. I did not reply and blocked the new contact. 2 days later, my sister Melissa telephoned. She extended an invitation to a family barbecue at her residence the subsequent weekend. I accepted, believing it would be pleasant to concentrate on typical family interactions after all the recent strain. Diane had a prearranged girls' weekend excursion, so I intended to attend solo. Upon my arrival at Melissa's home that Saturday, I immediately observed an unfamiliar vehicle in the driveway. Stepping into the backyard, I paused, seeing Gina seated at one of the picnic tables with Nathan, who was playing with my niece and nephew on the swing set. Melissa approached me with a hesitant smile and explained that she thought an informal, neutral environment might facilitate a connection between Nathan and me. She believed that if I simply spent some time in his presence, I would recognize what a wonderful child he was and might revise my stance. I drew Melissa aside and expressed that I felt entrapped and manipulated. She became defensive, asserting she was merely attempting to assist everyone implicated. When I stated I was departing, she accused me of immaturity and creating needless discord. Kevin, my brother-in-law, endeavored to intervene, suggesting I remain and simply treat Gina as another guest, but I declined. As I walked towards my vehicle, Gina followed me, Nathan trailing behind her. She loudly questioned my departure, making it impossible for me to leave without acknowledging them. Gazing at Nathan's perplexed expression, I felt immense sympathy for him being placed in such an uncomfortable situation by adults who ought to have known better. I simply stated I had forgotten another engagement and needed to depart, then entered my car and drove away. The repercussions were instantaneous. My phone was inundated with communications from family members who had observed the interaction. My mother telephoned to assert that I had humiliated everyone and needlessly wounded Nathan's emotions. Even relatives not present at the barbecue somehow learned of it and extended their unsolicited perspectives. 2 days after the barbecue incident, something considerably more troubling occurred. Diane contacted me, visibly distressed. Apparently, Gina had somehow acquired her professional email address and dispatched a lengthy message alleging that during our coffee meeting, I had admitted to still harboring affection for Gina and being uncertain about our engagement. The email contained several fabricated statements attributed to me and advised Diane to do herself a favor by terminating our relationship before investing more time in it. Fortunately, Diane never questioned me for an instant. She forwarded the email to me, and we deliberated on how to proceed. We concluded that direct interaction would only invite further contact, so Diane simply blocked Gina's email address and enhanced her social media privacy configurations. Yesterday, the situation escalated further. Diane messaged me during her workday, informing me that Melissa had appeared unannounced at her place of employment. Melissa had brought both her children and requested to speak with Diane privately. When Diane suggested they meet after work hours instead, Melissa declined to depart, causing sufficient disturbance that Diane's supervisor took notice. Eventually, Diane took a reluctant break to converse with Melissa at the cafe across the street. According to Diane, Melissa spent 20 minutes attempting to persuade her that ending our relationship would be most beneficial for everyone. She asserted I was spiritually tied to Gina due to our marital vows, irrespective of the legal divorce, and that my unwillingness to accept this bond was inflicting distress upon everyone. She even implied that Diane's non-Christian way of life, Diane engages in yoga and occasionally burns incense, was impeding my recognition of God's design for my existence. Diane, who maintained remarkable composure, simply listened until Melissa exhausted her arguments, then returned to work without addressing the allegations. When she recounted this to me later, we were both troubled by the escalation and the increasingly theological context of the circumstances. This morning I received a text from Kevin, apologizing for Melissa's conduct. He clarified that Gina had recently been spending more time with them, often bringing Nathan for informal gatherings with their children. According to Kevin, Gina had been emotionally vulnerable during these visits, frequently weeping about Nathan's need for a paternal figure and her remorse concerning our divorce. Kevin conceded that Melissa had become progressively more committed to the notion of rectifying the situation, perceiving it almost as a sacred undertaking. The most illuminating aspect of Kevin's message was the disclosure that Gina had recently commenced attending a women's scripture study group, facilitated by my mother. This elucidated the unexpected congruence among my mother, sister, and former spouse, as well as the religious implications that had begun to permeate their arguments. Diane and I spent last night deliberating our alternatives. We have resolved to temporarily distance ourselves from my family until boundaries can be honored. I have composed an email to dispatch to my mother, sister, and brother-in-law, clarifying that while I cherish our familial bonds, their recent actions have infringed upon fundamental boundaries and trust. I have made it explicit that any subsequent attempts to manipulate circumstances, disseminate misinformation, or harass Diane will result in a more enduring separation. Regarding legal avenues, we are contemplating a cease and desist letter if the contact persists, particularly directed at Diane in her professional environment. For the present, we are documenting every occurrence and hoping a clear articulation of boundaries will suffice. The assistance I have received here has been immensely beneficial during this tumultuous period. It is comforting to know I am not being irrational in anticipating fundamental respect for my life decisions, even from family members who hold differing views. Update 2 months have passed since my last communication, and the circumstances have continued to unfold in ways I never anticipated. Firstly, I wish to express gratitude for all the supportive remarks on my previous posts. Your insights helped me remain composed when it seemed everyone in my immediate circle was questioning my judgment. After dispatching the email I mentioned in my last update, which established clear boundaries with my family, I received varied reactions. My mother responded with a brief message stating she would pray for my heart to soften. Melissa did not reply directly but instead had Kevin contact me. He proposed we meet in person to resolve matters as a family. I agreed to meet Kevin, just Kevin, at a local eatery the subsequent weekend. The conversation was strained but ultimately constructive. Kevin confessed that while he had initially endorsed Melissa's attempts to reconnect me with Gina and Nathan, the situation had escalated beyond what he deemed reasonable. He disclosed that Gina had been spending multiple evenings per week at their residence, often staying for dinner and bringing Nathan for overnight visits with their children. According to Kevin, Melissa and Gina had cultivated an intense bond centered on the conviction that I needed to return to my family. They had even begun discussing the prospect of Gina and Nathan relocating to the rental property my sister and Kevin owned behind their house, which would render them adjacent neighbors. This scheme, it appeared, developed without Kevin's full endorsement, and he felt uneasy with the trajectory of events. Kevin also mentioned something that completely caught me off guard. Gina had begun discussing her entitlements as my true spouse in the eyes of God. Despite our legal divorce years ago, she had persuaded herself, with apparent encouragement from certain church congregants, that our marriage remained spiritually binding unless one party had committed infidelity, which neither of us had. I thanked Kevin for his forthrightness and reiterated my position. I had no intention of rekindling a relationship with Gina or assuming a paternal role in Nathan's life. I emphasized that persistently pursuing this agenda would only jeopardize my relationship with the entire family. 2 weeks after this meeting, Diane received a certified letter at our residence. It was from Gina, handwritten on stationery bearing a church letterhead. The contents were unsettling. Gina formally absolved Diane for interfering in a covenant marriage and expressed her readiness to welcome her as a friend once Diane accepted the truth and withdrew. The letter included several out-of-context biblical citations concerning marital and familial obligations. Diane and I were sufficiently alarmed by this escalation that we consulted a legal professional. The attorney advised that while the letter itself did not constitute harassment under local statutes, it established a pattern of conduct that could support future legal action if necessary. We resolved to have the lawyer dispatch a formal cease and desist letter to Gina, with a copy sent to my sister as well. The reaction was immediate and vehement. Melissa telephoned me, angrier than I had ever heard her. She accused me of involving legal counsel in a family matter and threatening a struggling single mother. She asserted I had changed since meeting Diane, and that I was now someone she barely recognized. During this call, Melissa inadvertently disclosed something significant. She had been assisting Gina in compiling a spiritual argument for presentation to the church elders, documenting why our divorce was religiously invalid and why I should be encouraged to restore my family with Gina and Nathan. This explained the synchronized pressure I had been experiencing from various church members, including distant relatives who had suddenly taken an interest in my personal life. I concluded the call by informing Melissa I required distance from this situation and would be withdrawing from family interactions for the foreseeable future. I blocked her number immediately thereafter, knowing it would only lead to further heated exchanges. Last week, events took an unforeseen twist. I received an email from Kevin, sent from his professional account. He informed me that he and Melissa had been experiencing considerable marital difficulties for several months, predating the current circumstances involving Gina. He had temporarily relocated and was residing with his brother. While he did not elaborate, he noted that Melissa's increasing religious fervor and her preoccupation with my situation concerning Gina had been contributing elements to their discord. Kevin also shared something that helped clarify Gina's intense focus on reestablishing contact with me. Apparently, Nathan's biological father had recently returned to the area. He had reached out to Gina, expressing a desire to forge a relationship with his son, and potentially pursuing formal custody arrangements. This development had prompted Gina's apprehension about securing an alternative paternal figure for Nathan, specifically me, before the biological father could complicate the matter. This intelligence illuminated the timing and intensity of Gina's endeavors. What I had perceived as merely an unhealthy adherence to the past was, in fact, a calculated effort to construct a new family narrative before Nathan's biological father could become involved. Yesterday, I received a text message from my mother. It was concise but meaningful. She wrote that following contemplation and introspection, she had come to believe that the church group had exceeded its bounds in its involvement with Gina's circumstances. She did not apologize for her own participation but proposed a family dinner next month to begin anew. I have not yet replied, as I am still assimilating everything. Diane and I have expedited our wedding arrangements. Instead of the larger ceremony we had initially planned for the autumn, we are now organizing a modest destination wedding in June with only a few intimate friends. We have also commenced searching for a home in a city approximately 3 hours away, where Diane has been presented with a promising career prospect. While the situation is not entirely resolved, I feel we are finally taking definitive measures to advance with our lives, notwithstanding the ongoing turmoil. I will provide another update if there are significant developments, but for now we are concentrating on constructing our future, rather than managing the disarray of the past. Update 3. 6 months have elapsed since my last update, and I felt it was appropriate to offer a conclusive resolution to this period of my life for those who have followed my circumstances from the outset. Shortly after my previous post, Diane and I proceeded with our intimate destination wedding in June. We extended invitations solely to our closest companions and my father, who resides across the country and has been divorced from my mother for many decades. The ceremony was tranquil and precisely what we desired, a stark contrast to the turmoil that had consumed the preceding months. A week after returning from our wedding journey, we finalized the purchase of a house in the city where Diane had received her job offer. The relocation transpired swiftly. We engaged professional movers and were settled in our new abode by early July. I was able to transfer to a branch office of my company in the same city, which represented a lateral career move, but afforded the fresh start we required. Before departing, I met with my mother for lunch. She had continued to reach out with increasingly conciliatory messages, and I concluded that one conversation was warranted before moving away. The meeting was strained but courteous. My mother conceded that the church group had become excessively involved in Gina's situation, and acknowledged that certain boundaries had been overstepped. However, she refrained from offering a complete apology, maintaining that everyone had acted out of concern for Nathan, and what they believed was in the best interest of all parties. I kept the discussion concise and factual, informing her of our completed wedding and impending relocation. I provided my new address but made it clear that any future relationship would hinge on respect for my marriage to Diane and the life choices we had made together. My mother appeared subdued by the finality of it all, perhaps at last realizing that the coercive tactics had only accelerated my departure from their lives rather than drawing me back into their orbit. As for Melissa and Kevin, their marital difficulties persisted. Kevin briefly returned home in August but, according to mutual acquaintances, moved out again in September, this time more permanently. He has since initiated divorce proceedings, citing irreconcilable differences. While I maintain occasional communication with Kevin via email, I have not spoken directly with Melissa since prior to our move. The most significant development pertains to Gina and Nathan. In August, I received an unexpected email from Gina. The tone was markedly distinct from her prior communications, formal, almost businesslike. She informed me that Nathan's biological father had proceeded with seeking partial custody, and that they were working with a mediator to establish a parenting arrangement. She acknowledged that her attempts to involve me in Nathan's life had been ill-advised and stated that she would not contact me again. This email was followed by a more formal communication from her attorney, requesting that I sign a statement confirming I had never acted in a paternal capacity toward Nathan, and had no intention of asserting any parental rights. This was presumably to bolster her position in the custody discussions with Nathan's biological father. I consulted my lawyer, who advised that signing such a document was reasonable and would establish a clear legal demarcation. I signed and returned it, which appears to have finally concluded that chapter. Last month, I received a voicemail from my mother informing me that Gina and Nathan had relocated to a neighboring state where Nathan's father had moved for work. The custody arrangement apparently includes substantial time with his father, who has, by all accounts, embraced his parental duties. My mother sounded resigned, almost disheartened, as she conveyed this news. The situation that had caused so much upheaval had resolved itself without any of their interventions. Diane and I have comfortably established ourselves in our new locale. The geographical separation has afforded a broader view of the entire circumstance. While I occasionally experience a pang of sorrow regarding the fragmented family connections, I acknowledge that the limits we instituted were essential and beneficial. Some relationships may mend over time. Others may not. Regardless, we have carved out room to live our lives in accordance with our own principles and preferences. For those curious about a potential reconciliation with my sister or mother, I am adopting a cautious approach. My mother has visited once. A brief and somewhat uncomfortable weekend during which she met some of our new acquaintances and saw our residence. The visit concluded more favorably than it commenced, with a provisional understanding to attempt another visit in the spring. Melissa has made no direct effort to contact me, though I occasionally receive updates about her through Kevin or shared friends. Regarding Gina and Nathan, I extend my best wishes to them but uphold the strict boundary of no contact. I hope Nathan cultivates a significant bond with his biological father, and that Gina achieves serenity concerning the realities of our past and present situations. Diane and I are concentrating on constructing our shared life. Our choice to remain without children has enabled us to expedite our financial objectives. We are now progressing towards the early retirement I have pursued for so long, with intentions to commence extensive travel within the next 5 years. Reflecting on this entire ordeal, I am struck by how a decision I made years ago, to be forthright about not desiring children and to dissolve a marriage rather than compromise on such a fundamental life choice, continued to echo through my life in unforeseen manners. While the journey has not been simple, I remain persuaded it was the correct course for everyone involved, even if that required years and considerable upheaval for others to accept. My gratitude goes out to everyone who provided encouragement and counsel throughout this demanding period. Your viewpoints assisted me in maintaining perspective, when it would have been simple to waver.